Hello all, welcome back to Concept E classes. We have already completed a portion of chapter 2, Microorganisms Friend and Foe. So in this video, we shall complete the remaining portions of this chapter. So before starting part 2, let us briefly revise what all we have covered in the first video of chapter 2. We studied what are microorganisms, the living organisms around us which we cannot see with our naked eyes are called as microorganisms. They are called as microorganisms because they are very small in size. Then we studied the classification of microorganisms: bacteria, fungi, algae, protozoa and virus. The next topic that we discussed was where these microorganisms live. They are present everywhere, from ice-cold environment to very hot desert. They are present inside and outside of living organisms. Then we studied how these microorganisms affects us as a friend. We studied the good effects of microorganisms on human beings, like the use of microorganisms in making bread, the use of microorganisms commercially in medicinal purposes, how microorganisms help in soil fertility. So students who have not attended the first video on chapter 2 are advised to first go through the detailed lecture in the part 1 video. Now in part 2, we shall deal with the remaining portion of chapter 2, which essentially contain the topics listed in the slides. We shall study about the harmful effects of microorganisms, the different methods of food preservation, and a detailed description about nitrogen fixation and nitrogen cycle. So let's get along with the first topic, which starts with harmful effects of microorganisms. Microorganisms play an important role in our lives. Some of them are beneficial in many ways, whereas some are harmful. Beneficial means the microorganisms would act as a friend for us or sometimes as an enemy or a foe to us. Now let's see the harmful effects of microorganisms. Some microorganisms causes diseases in human beings. Some microorganism causes diseases in plants as well as in animals, and some microorganisms spoil food, leather and even clothing. So let's discuss each of these harmful effects of microorganisms in. So the first point is disease causing microorganisms in humans. Some of the microorganisms cause diseases on plants, animals and humans, and these disease causing microorganisms are called as pathogens. In part 1 of the first video, we studied that microorganisms are everywhere, that is in water, in air, in all kinds of surfaces. So, these pathogens can enter into our body through the air we breathe, through the food we eat, through the water we drink, and they can also be transmitted by direct contact with an infected person, that is through physical contact as well, and microorganisms can also be spread by certain animals and insects called as carriers. When this pathogen enters into our body, we may fall sick and get various kinds of diseases. So some diseases might spread from an infected person to another, while some might not. Those microbial diseases that can be spread from an infected person to a healthy person through air, water, food or physical contact are called as communicable diseases. And those microbial diseases that do not spread are called as non-communicable diseases. Now, how do these communicable diseases spread? When a person having cold, cough or sneezes, fine droplets of moisture carrying thousands of viruses are spread through the air or through the water or the food around the infected persons. And when a healthy person breathes in that air or drinks the water or eat the contaminated food or get in touch with that infected person, then the disease causing microorganism enters into the body of the healthy person, causing infection or illness. So this is how communicable diseases spread. And some of the examples of communicable diseases are cholera, common cold, chickenpox, and tuberculosis. There are some insects and animals which act as carriers of disease-causing microorganisms. That is, microbial diseases can also be spread by some insects and animals, and they are called as carriers. Examples of such carriers are housefly and mosquitoes. Now let's see how housefly act as a carrier of disease-causing microorganisms. The housefly collects pathogens on their legs and mouth when they sit on garbage or excreta, and then they transfer these pathogens to food. That is, these flies sit on garbage and animal excreta. The pathogens stick to their bodies, and when these flies sit on uncovered food, they may transfer the pathogens, and whoever eats this contaminated food will get sick. So it is always advisable to keep the food covered and avoid eating uncovered food. Another example of carrier is mosquito. Now let's see how mosquitoes act as carrier. Female Anopheles mosquito carry the parasite of malaria called as Plasmodium, which is transmitted to the bloodstream of a person when a mosquito bites, thereby causing malaria. That is, when a female Anopheles mosquito bites a person suffering from malaria, it sucks the blood of the person which contains the parasite of malaria. Now, when this infected mosquito bites or sucks the blood of a healthy person, it transfers this malarial microbes into the bloodstream of this healthy person, causing malaria. Similar to this malaria, dengue is also another disease which is transmitted through mosquitoes, and the carrier is female Aedes mosquito. Now let's study some of the common human diseases caused by microorganisms. The disease, the microorganism, mode of transmission, and precautions are described inside this table. Now let's discuss each of this human disease. Tuberculosis. It is caused by a bacteria and the mode of transmission is air. Measles is caused by a virus and transmitted through air. Chickenpox. It is also caused by a virus and the mode of transmission is either air or through direct contact with the infected person. Polio. It is caused by a virus and the mode of transmission is either air or water. Now the preventive measures of these human diseases are: we should keep the patient in complete isolation and keep the personal belonging of that infected person away from those of others. Then vaccination. These diseases can be prevented by proper vaccination. Cholera, it is caused by the microorganism bacteria and the mode of transmission is either through food or through water. Then typhoid, it is also caused by a bacteria, mode of transmission is water. Now how can we prevent cholera and typhoid? We should maintain a personal hygiene and good sanitary habits like washing your hands and all. We should consume proper cooked food and boil drinking water. And through vaccination also we could prevent these diseases. Next we'll see about the hepatitis A. It is caused by a microorganism virus. It is transmitted through water. How can we prevent hepatitis A? By drinking boiled water and through the process of vaccination. The last one is malaria. It is caused by a microorganism called as protozoa and is transmitted through mosquitoes. How can we prevent malaria? We could use mosquito net and repellents, spray insecticides and control breeding of mosquitoes by not allowing the water to collect in the surroundings. So we have already discussed the diseases caused by microorganisms in humans. Now we will study the disease causing microorganisms in animals. Microorganisms not only cause diseases in humans and plants, but it also causes diseases in animals. Example, anthrax. Anthrax is a dangerous humans and cattle disease caused by a bacterium. See these grey or black spores that you can find on this cow is a symptom of anthrax. Anthrax is caused by a bacteria known as Bacillus anthracis. Anthrax can be found naturally in soil, and when animals eat the plants which is infected by this bacteria or drink the water contaminated by this bacteria, the cattle gets affected. Another one example is foot and mouth disease. See, this is the foot, and it also, disease is also found inside the mouth, and it's caused by a virus. So we already saw the diseases caused by microorganisms in humans, in animals, and now we'll see the disease causing microorganisms in plants. Several microorganisms cause diseases in plants like wheat, rice, potato, sugarcane, orange, apple, etc. And these diseases reduces the yield of crops. That is, the production of crops would be very less if the plants get affected by microorganisms. And these diseases can be controlled by the use of certain chemicals which kill the microbes. So the plant diseases are citrus canker. It is caused by a microorganism called as bacteria, and the mode of transmission is air. Citrus canker is a disease which mainly affects citrus species only, like lemons, orange or grapefruit, and it mainly affects the leaves, stems and fruits of the citrus tree. Now the second plant disease was the rust of wheat. It is caused by the microorganism fungi, and the mode of transmission is either through air or through bad seeds. Wheat rust is a fungal disease that affects the wheat, barley or rye stems, leaves and grains. The third plant disease is the yellow vein mosaic of okra. You know what okra is? Okra is bindi or lady's finger. The microorganism which causes this disease is virus, and the mode of transmission is an insect. It's mainly called as white fly that transmits this disease called as yellow vein mosaic. See, we could see the difference in this. From the green leaves, these become yellow and it would be like a mosaic pattern. Have you ever experienced having stomach ache or vomiting after consuming certain food? If yes, that may be due to food poisoning. So the fourth harmful effect of microorganism is food poisoning. Food poisoning happens due to the consumption of food spoiled by some microorganisms such as bacteria or viruses. These microorganisms that grow on our food sometimes produces toxic substances which make the food poisonous, and food poisoning may cause serious illness and even death. So it is very important that we should preserve our food from being spoiled. So we have already completed the harmful effects of microorganisms on humans, animals and plants, and we have also dealt with the topic of food poisoning. Now we will study about food preservation. In chapter 1, we have learned how we preserve or store food grains. Here we will deal with the methods or techniques to preserve cooked food at home for a longer period of time and saving it from the attack of microorganisms. So the various food preservation methods are chemical method, preservation by common salt, preserving the food by sugar, preservation by oil and vinegar, heat and cold treatments, and finally storage. And so the first method is chemical method. Salt and edible oils are common chemicals generally used to check the growth of microorganisms. Therefore, they are called as preservatives. We add salt or acid preservatives to the food to prevent the attack of microorganisms. Sodium benzoate and sodium metabisulfate are common preservatives used in jams and squashes to check their spoilage. The second method is preservation by common salt. Common salt has been used to preserve meat for a long period of time. Meat and fish are covered with dry salt to check the growth of bacteria. That is, the salt absorbs enough water and restrains the growth of bacteria. Salting is also used to preserve amla, raw mangoes, tamarind, etc. Now the third method is preservation by sugar. Jams, jellies and squashes are preserved by sugar. Sugar reduces the moisture content which inhibits the growth of bacteria which spoils food. That is, the sugar, it draws the water from the microbes, leaving the microbe cells dehydrated, thus killing them. Now the fourth method is preservation by oil and vinegar. Use of oil and vinegar prevents the spoilage of pickles because bacteria cannot live in such an environment. That is, in such a type of environment, the growth of microbes or bacteria is restrained. Vegetable, fruits, fish, and meat are often preserved by this method. Now the fifth method is the heat and cold treatments. Boiling kills many microorganisms. Similarly, when we keep our food in the refrigerator, low temperature also restrains the growth of microbes. Example of hot and cold treatment is the pasteurization of milk. Now how do we do this pasteurization? The milk is heated about 70 degrees Celsius for 15 to 30 seconds and then it is suddenly chilled and stored, thereby preventing the growth of microbes. And this process is called as pasteurization. And pasteurized milk can be consumed without boiling. The last method of food preservation is storage and packing. These days, dry fruits and even vegetables are sold in sealed airtight packets to prevent the attack of microbes. Now the last topic of this chapter is nitrogen fixation and nitrogen cycle. So let's first study what nitrogen fixation is and then we'll go to nitrogen cycle. The atmosphere contains 78% of nitrogen and this nitrogen cannot be taken directly by plants and animals. Some microorganisms like bacteria are able to fix the nitrogen from the atmosphere and those microorganisms are called as nitrogen fixers. That is, these nitrogen fixers fix the nitrogen from the atmosphere. Now one such example or one such bacteria is Rhizobium. This Rhizobium, it lives in the root nodules of leguminous plants such as beans and peas. And this bacteria, they captures the nitrogen from the air and converts it into compounds of nitrogen like amino acids or nitrates, which is then utilized by plants from the soil through roots. And there are nitrogen fixers that exist even without a plant host. Example, blue-green algae. It's also called as cyanobacteria. So this is the process of nitrogen fixation. Now let's see what nitrogen cycle is. Nitrogen cycle means the circulation of nitrogen in various forms through nature. Sometimes the nitrogen gets fixed through action of lightning. That is, the enormous energy of lightning, it breaks the nitrogen molecules that is present in the air and it combines with the oxygen in the air forming nitrogen oxide. Then it dissolves in the rain forming nitrates and it is carried back to the earth. So even though the nitrogen is fixed through lightning or through nitrogen fixers, the amount of nitrogen in the atmosphere always remains a constant. How is that possible? The nitrogen fixers fix the nitrogen from the atmosphere and it converts it into compounds of nitrogen, which is then utilized by plants through their root system. Animals then, which feed on these plants, get these proteins and other nitrogen compounds. When animals and plants die, the microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi present in the soil decomposed these dead matter, thereby converting this nitrogenous waste back into nitrogenous compound, which is then used by plants again. And there are certain bacteria which convert some part of this nitrogenous compound into nitrogen gas, which goes back into the atmosphere. Thereby, the full circulation of nitrogen is complete. Now let's study this in a form of a cycle. So this is the complete nitrogen cycle. The atmospheric nitrogen can be fixed in two ways. One is through nitrogen fixing bacteria and the other is through lightning. So let's see the first step. The atmospheric nitrogen is first fixed by nitrogen fixing bacteria. That is, the nitrogen fixing bacteria fix the atmospheric nitrogen and the bacteria in turn fix the nitrogen into nitrogenous compounds such as nitrates or ammonia or urea, and it's sent to the soil. Now, nitrogen can also be fixed with the help of lightning. That is, an enormous amount of lightning breaks the nitrogen molecules and it combines with the air, oxygen, forming nitrogen oxide, and when it rains, it goes back into this soil. Now, these compounds of nitrogen is uptake by the plants, and when the animal eat these plants, the animals get the proteins and nitrogen compound as well. Now, when these plants or animals die, the nitrogenous waste, that is the dead organic matter of these plants and animals, are decomposed again by microorganisms, and in that process they produce nitrogenous compounds, and some bacteria turns these compounds directly into nitrogen and it circulates back into the atmosphere. So, this is the complete cycle of nitrogen. So, we have come to an end of our video. Now, let's take a quick recap of what all we have studied in part 2. We studied first the harmful effects of microorganisms, that is, the diseases caused by microorganisms in humans, the diseases caused by microorganisms in animals as well as plants, and the process of food poisoning. Then we studied how the food can be preserved, and we studied a set of steps or methods like chemical method, preservation by common salt, preservation by sugar, preservation of food by oil and vinegar, hot and cold treatments, storage and packing. And last, we studied about nitrogen fixation and nitrogen. So, we have completed the entire topics of chapter 2. Tune in soon for the next session. The next video will be on the question and answers of chapter 2. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you find this contents useful. Thank you so much. May God bless you all. Take care. Bye-bye.